Brooke, welcome to Millionaire University. I'm so excited to talk to you today. Your sister is a good friend of mine, and it's always a good time when you get to meet family members and other entrepreneurs who are crushing it. And there just must be something that just was passed down into the bloodline of you guys because you're so talented. So, welcome to the podcast. I'm so happy you're here today.
Oh, thank you so much, Kirsten. It's an honor to be here, and it's an honor to be associated with my sister because she is one of the most hardworking, genuine people I know. I'm not just saying that because she's my sister. So it's an honor to be her sister and have that association, and I'm so excited to chat today.
Yeah. And I didn't mention it's Corinne Stocco. She was on the podcast here before. Very talented blogger. And like I said, it runs in the family because we're going to talk about the formation of your business and your entrepreneurial journey and all of the things that you've kind of done and are continuing to do with your brand. And I was thinking as you were talking, just introducing ourselves, like we should have had some kind of food sitting here. Like you know how there's people who have channels where they'll literally eat while they're doing like the hot wings channel.
I was just reading an
That would have been
article about
fun.
him last night. We should have. I inhaled like a clementine earlier, so I don't know if that counts, but next time we'll have
Sure.
to have some food ready.
I know that would be so fun. Got to switch it up every once in a while. So, just to give the listeners context as to why I'm saying that, you have a very successful blog and brand, Female Foodie. So, give us a little backstory into that, and even if there's some other entrepreneurial endeavors that led into that, what your kind of past has looked like and what you've dabbled in, all the way up until maybe the present.
Okay. Well, I've always loved work when you're like entrepreneurial endeavors, as a kid, like I worked at the local snack shack and concession stand at the baseball park, but I actually, I've thought about this, like, was I always an entrepreneur or was I not? Because I went to school actually for 7 years to become a speech language pathologist, which is not entrepreneurial at all. It's very much like show up, do what you're told. I mean, it's a great job, but it's not forward thinking for the most part. But I did have a job my senior year of high school where I taught piano, and I would go drive to the students. So that was kind of my unique,
Your little unique value proposition.
exactly. And the parents loved it. And I taught 30-minute lessons for like $10. And so I was making $20 an hour, and I graduated in 2008. So think about like this is however many years ago. And
Yeah.
I was making $20 an hour as a high school senior, and I had like 25 or 30 students. And
Wow.
I did have a touch of that. But no, to answer your question, when I was throughout college, I went up to West Yellowstone during the summer. I studied at Utah State University and the University of Utah to become a speech language pathologist, as I mentioned. And one of my really close friends just talked me into coming up there. She said, it'll be so fun. We can get a bunch of jobs and work, till our feet are about to fall off. And I went up there with my friend Melissa and definitely a few other girlfriends, and fell in love with it. I fell in love with like the small town life and being in this gorgeous, near the great outdoors. But I loved just working tirelessly. I worked in a motel. I worked for several restaurants. And the second of what was probably 5 summers that I went up there for, I was living above this barbecue restaurant. And I remember turning to my friend Rachel, and at this time I had already had like a personal blog. We all had those, right? The family blog,
Blogger.
yeah,
Yep.
with the sidebar of like who you followed and the
Yep.
header, right? Like maybe yours was like the Tyrrells,
Oh,
and
yeah.
which honestly is so fun to think back. I, at the time though, like wasn't married, didn't have kids. My sister Corinne, like she's 6 years older than I, so she was a little more like doing that. So I had like a personal blog that was just like, here's all the things I'm up to as a single person. But I really wanted to document the food that I was eating. And I've always been like super into food. I mean, my entire family, we are food lovers. Thanks to my mom, who people may recognize as Cy Foster from A Bountiful Kitchen. But I've always loved food, and I've always loved eating out. So I think it's kind of an equal part like nature nurture type of situation. And so I just looked at my friend Rachel when I was in West Yellowstone. This is 2010. And I said, I'm going to start a blog, but just like write about the things I'm eating. And, in hindsight, yeah, you're laughing and I'm laughing because it's like, okay, like, is that actually a viable idea? But, this tiny touristy town, there were only like 1,000 people that lived there. year round, but there were millions of people that went through every summer. And so this was my second summer up there, and I had already tried a lot, and I was just excited about the proposition of just documenting, like taking pictures,
Yeah.
sharing these little tiny places throughout town. And, I'm so grateful because my friend Rachel, who's still a dear friend today, she looked at me and said, why wouldn't you do that? You absolutely should. And whether or not she actually meant it, I don't know. But I think we all need that friend, right, that is willing to
Yeah.
just cheer us on and help us pursue our dreams. I had zero intention of business, side hustle, passion project. It was just for fun. And it was totally natural. And I went to Europe that fall, and I was like an English teacher for this family in Spain. And I went like on the weekends, I would take like these cheap Ryanair, EasyJet flights around Europe. And I traveled, and I just kept eating out. And I didn't have a lot of spare money, so they were kind of more budget things, like a cupcake place in London or a pastry shop in Oporto, in Portugal. But I started sharing these things, and it did gain a little traction. I was looking at stats even back in the early days, and had a really fun time seeing where people were tuning in from all over the world. And then I had a lot of fun with my food photography, which was for sure a big, my mom and her website had already been running for a few years, and that really inspired me. I was so fascinated by the fact that you could, this is of course long before like these kind of smartphones,
Yeah.
where we can actually
Mm-hmm.
take like pretty good pictures with our phones. Remarkable, actually. But my mom had this DSLR that she bought from Costco, and she was working really hard on taking beautiful pictures for her website. And she would, we would take it everywhere, like if it was like a girls' trip, or she just kind of had it around all the time. And so
Yeah.
I kind of had fun. Like, I actually went and bought my first DSLR, like the exact same one, before I went on that Europe trip. And I had an absolute heyday with this camera. I photographed with this camera too for like until 2019. So for almost a decade.
Wow.
It's just it was the Canon Rebel T1i, complete
Oh
starter
yeah.
camera. My brother and sister gifted me the Nifty 50, the 50 millimeter lens, which is like such a great, inexpensive portrait lens for anyone listening that wants like
Yep.
a little upgrade. But I had really minimal equipment, but I fell in love with like what I felt like were beautiful pictures. And now looking back, I'm still proud of them, but I've come a long way. Um, and just, for honestly the next 4 years, it was super casual. I was going to school. I was then in grad school, and I just documented restaurants and places I ate. And really, not to get too deep into the story, but really what changed for me was probably 2014. I really decided to commit myself to trying to see what I could do with the analytics. I started publishing guides instead of doing like single restaurant write-ups. I would do a
Mm-hmm.
guide. Like, I think my first ever one was the best Mexican restaurants in Salt Lake City. And I did like 10 restaurants on there, right? And it was so fun to put a collection together. And kind of meanwhile, even though I started my blog first, I had been growing a social media following. And so I would kind of blast it out to them on social media, and then I would publish these posts. I remember making a huge deal out of my like top 10 restaurants in Salt Lake City because, Salt Lake City was my readership for so many years.
Yeah.
And so just playing the Google Analytics game, I remember getting my first 1,000 page views a month, and then 5,000, and then 10,000. I, over the years, have applied to 3 different ad revenue networks before I've met their thresholds and asked permission, and have been, accepted into all of them. And
Amazing.
yeah, and just that SEO for years and years has been my game. And, the pandemic is when I got into recipe development and haven't looked back. So I don't know how full steam you want me to go ahead, Kirsten, but that's kind of in a Cliff's Note version. That's how it started.
Amazing. I love it. It's such a cool story. And I think it's so fun to look back on this and say, and the reason I chuckled when you said I had this idea to just like document what I ate, because now it's actually pretty normal and commonplace. Like there's 1 in a billion TikTok accounts, it feels like, that do that, right? But you were a pioneer of that, and you were doing that when it was a weird idea to most people. And it's like, yeah, it's a brilliant idea, honestly, because people love that. We love to see what other people are eating. There's literally something that fires in our brain when we watch other people eat food. or see good food. And I remember seeing your stuff like pretty early on, probably because of Corinne and her talking about your things. And I even remember being like, oh, I wish she had food guides for like closer to me because I live in southern Utah and you had all those. So I do remember, and it was the Wild West. And it was such a different time when you could start a blog, no pressure. You didn't even have this like vision and focus of being an entrepreneur, having a business from it. Is it wild now to think? I heard Macaulay Culkin say like he feels like it was a different person that did all those movies and now he's just reaping the benefits of it. Does it just feel so like crazy to think that all that work you put in is now generating like what you now have to be a business that allows you to, do what you do?
It is crazy. And I have a ton of gratitude. And what I am really glad that I did is I poured my heart into something I'm passionate about. Sometimes I have this like kind of limiting belief, like, what if we all do things that we're passionate about? And then who's going to take out the trash and who's going to, I kind of spiral in these thoughts. But really, I do think that like, if you're the personality that like you have big dreams and there's something you're really passionate about. I mean, my husband, like, he loves to golf, or maybe you like to cook or eat out like me, or maybe, there's so many. I mean, my sister is passionate about fashion, but has also pivoted into this really cool space with codependency and healthy boundaries and relationships. And so I think that, looking back, that's still me. I just had no
Mhm.
idea. I had absolutely no idea. I mean, the things that I'm doing today now, especially like in regards to like our Italy tours, there's so many things that I do now that I could not have dreamt up, that I couldn't have cooked
Yeah.
up even in my wildest imagination. And I have the internet to thank for that. And I have at large part my Instagram community. Blogs are
Mhm.
great and websites are great in terms of volume. But like, I think that, many content creators would say that they have like a place where it's their community. Maybe like they're a YouTuber, right? And they have loyal people on YouTube, or even now I'm trying to develop like a Substack community. But those people that have from those early days read those
Mhm.
guides for better or worse and started making recipes with me in the pandemic, like those are the people that make doing what I do possible.
Yeah. It sounds so fun, and I think you just said a food analogy, and I was gonna say, yeah, pun intended, like what you've been cooking up.
I love a good
I
pun.
love it. I know, it's so much fun. So, tell me a little bit, you mentioned that you had different ad networks that you applied before you were even technically qualified, which I think is pretty bold, because I know as a person who's been part of this online scene since its inception and not even realizing that I was so early on, I think at the time I already felt behind even a few years in, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, everybody's already got this figured out." Hindsight, I wish I would have realized we were all figuring it out as we
Yep.
went, but I remember seeing those things and feeling like, "Oh, I don't have the high enough follower count, a high enough view count, whatever." So, props to you for doing that and just kinda going after it. But was that initially, I guess, the way that you monetized, or were you selling any of your guides? Or, like, what was kind of the process of monetization over the years?
Yeah, so just to answer your question about the ad networks, so the first ad network, I never did Google AdSense, thank heavens. And I've heard from so many people like, don't do it. It's like pennies, not, I mean, I don't know. Maybe things have changed. But I started with, okay, was it called Monumetric? It was the Six Sisters ad network.
Mm.
They used to
Oh.
have an ad network and they would like do conferences. And so I believe it was called Monumetric, but I can't remember their threshold if it was like 10,000 page views a month or 30,000, but I was just under that. But I took a screenshot of my analytics and like kind of proved to them like I'm on track. Like, which honestly is a no-brainer, right? It's like, let me just make
Mhm.
money for you, right?
Yeah,
So they let
right.
me in, and then I jumped to maybe a year or two later, as I continued to really gain some momentum with SEO. I jumped over to Mediavine, which Mediavine's an awesome company, and I think that Mediavine has, I feel like you have like the Ubers of business, and then like the Lyfts. The Ubers are like, we're in New York, LA, Miami, we're hitting the big cities. We're going to be the most like chic service. And then you have the Lyfts that are like, we're going to go to Milwaukee and Reno. And I mean, I don't know. I'm just spitting out,
Mhm.
cities, but their strategy was a little different, right? And I think Mediavine kind of has that strategy where they capitalized on people that couldn't quite get to 100,000 page views with AdThrive, which is who I
Mhm.
leapfrogged to then. And truthfully, I leapfrogged to AdThrive purely off of reputation. There's no way to really prove who you'll make more money with. I certainly didn't make less moving to AdThrive, which is now called Raptive. But I did it just based on a gut feeling. I felt like it would maybe give me more opportunities. I may earn more money. Interestingly now too, just to be totally transparent, my page views have just tanked over the last year.
Mm.
And I'm okay with it. I think that, and I'll go into like more detail about some of the different revenue streams we have, but SEO, I love SEO. I mean, I'm not like a complete expert, but I really enjoy geeking out on it for so many years. Like I had, especially with the restaurant content, I had a lot of
Mm.
fun kind of dominating some of these little
I bet.
categories, especially like in Salt Lake, right? And the great thing is
Yeah.
that I was doing high quality content. So I knew that like if I published a guide, I didn't feel gimmicky or spammy at all. I knew if I was publishing something, it not only was great, it was better than anything else out there and so much better than these like pay to play Yelp, collections, right, of restaurants
Mm-hmm.
and whatnot. But I had a lot of fun targeting key phrases for years. And then, honestly, over the last year and even two, it's really AI has changed a lot, and I'm here to embrace it,
Yeah.
but we don't get even for our recipes. I mean, we are getting fraction of the views that we used to. Instead of my articles ranking top for even things like best restaurants in New York City. That's a guide I have that used to rank on the first page, or best barbecue in Austin, or best restaurants in San Diego. These are like guides from across the country that I developed with my team that I had for several years, literally until this last year, that they just don't perform as well now. We're seeing Reddit responses. We're seeing AI generated responses. And so now,
Mm.
I'm kind of backpedaling to the early days, and I'm doing a Substack, and it's a slow and steady gradual process. I did have this Female Foodie app for several years, which kind of acted like a membership site or like a newsletter.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of now what I've segued into with the Substack. My goal and hope is to create, it's really like the early days of blogging, a super loyal, tight-knit community there. I'm in no rush. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's a paid subscription. It's $5 a month, and people can try their first post for free. So I do a recipe every Monday and like something I call Female Foodie Friday, which is like my weekly newsletter every Friday. And I'm loving it, Kirsten. Like,
Cool.
I'm absolutely loving it. And I have some big goals with it, but I know it's going to be just years of that. But for many, many years, like probably 8 to 9, and I still get a great paycheck every, from Raptive, but
Mm-hmm.
paid ads were for sure our bread and butter. I've had some failed experiments for sure, but something that's worked really well has been our Female Foodie tours. And
Yeah, tell us about
yeah,
that, because how long have you been doing that? I was on like a wait list, and I was kind of talking to my mom. Should we do this? Should we do it? I think we were hoping for Italy next year, and it ended up not working, but I love it. I think it's amazing, and I don't even know when I became aware of the fact that you were doing those trips. And I think I even asked Corinne, thinking you lived overseas. And I didn't realize it's like you're just hosting these trips. I had a totally different, like, convoluted concept of what your life was. So tell me a little bit about how that came to be and how that fits into the business.
yeah. So, I'm honored that you think I was living in Italy because that's like a dream of mine. But it again, crazy, like totally naturally something that happened, not something we cooked up. So, to make a long story not too long, in kind of the midst of the past 10 years of my marriage, 10 years is when like I said, I started to be really serious about content creation. I brought on writers. I was really trying to be like kind of the female version of like Eater or The Infatuation.
Mm-hmm.
And in the year 2018, I had my first kid, and our lease ended. We were living in Austin. We just lived there for a year, and my husband said, we can renew our lease, or should we like travel for a few months? And I had kind of floated this idea to him earlier in the year, but when it's like his idea, it all of a sudden became a
Mm-hmm.
better idea.
Inception.
Yeah. So I was like, yes, let's do that. And this is like August. And so and it was honestly a great time of our lives because we didn't have like nice furniture. We had like filled our apartment, or excuse me, it was a rental home, but we'd filled it with like IKEA furniture. I did add some good quality kitchen stuff. So I pretty much sold everything, but I kept a crib that Corinne gave me for my baby. And then I kept my kitchen stuff and some personal items, and that was it. We consolidated
Mm.
all of our items. We got rid of everything. And my husband had been working remote since before we got married. And so we decided to travel for till the end of the year, which was just a few months. And it turned into this 18-month adventure of just,
Wow.
yeah, I mean, I'm so grateful we did it. It turned into booking Airbnb after Airbnb. And what we usually did, and this is a great hack for people that love to travel or maybe work remote and want to have experiences like this, is we booked a place for a month at a time, because a lot of times people will offer a generous discount for a customer that wants to stay for multiple weeks. Because if you think about it, like, makes it so much easier on the
Mm-hmm.
host. Not all hosts do it, but a lot of them do. So we went from Seattle to Montana to LA to San Diego to the Portland area, which is now where we live, to all across the country. Kind of in the middle of it, I said, Cody, it's my husband, we need to go to Italy. And
Need to think bigger.
yeah, well, I'm just thinking, like, I mean, and now we have 3 kids, and I knew we wanted more kids. And I'm like, this is going to be so much harder once we have more kids. Ironically, now I have taken all of my children multiple times to Italy. So,
Mm-hmm.
I kind of, I guess I didn't need to panic so much, but I had been to Italy a handful of times. Had fallen in love with it. And so he said, okay, I found this apartment. It was a little bit above our monthly budget, but it worked. And we spent a month in Rome and a month in Bologna. And then we went to actually the UK for a month after that. But I just got over there. I had a pretty good audience, nothing insane. I don't know how many followers I would have had. Oh, maybe 30,000 followers on Instagram, maybe 40,000, which is a great audience. I think people get way
Mm-hmm.
too hung up on numbers sometimes. I mean, I love the analogy of, like, think of a room with 30,000 people.
Yeah.
So we go over there and I'm sharing everything on stories. I'm like, look at this water fountain. Look at this pizza. Look at these streets. Like, I'm just basking in it, and I'm taking my audience along for the ride. And we did have the hope to publish a guide too. So as we travel to all these places, we were covering it on YouTube and Instagram, and I was publishing all these guides for all these random places. And what happened when we were in Italy was different than in the States. People started asking, well, could you put a trip together? Could you host a trip? And I was like, no,
Hmm.
no, I will not host a trip. Like, I'm in my mind, I'm like, I'm just a tourist here. Like, I'm vacationing, I'm traveling, I'm having fun, but, like, I'm not an expert. I did become a little bit of an expert, though, and I think people sense that. I think they could sense that I had a good grasp of the country and some of the cultural things that were and weren't okay there, how to find good restaurants, how to do cool things in these different cities. So, long story short, we get home, we travel throughout the rest of the year, and I was actually in St. George. It was December of 2019. And we were getting ready to kind of move back up to the Salt Lake area. And I got this random, I wish I knew who it was, but I got this random DM. It was on a Sunday evening, and someone said, again, I mean, I don't know how many times I heard it, will you please put together a trip for Italy? And I just told my husband, I'm like, oh my gosh, like, people are still asking for this. And he looked at me and he was like, why don't you? And again, it's kind of like my friend Rachel. Like, instead of being like, ugh, don't do that. I mean, think of it from his point of view, right? We've got like a 1-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
So easily he could have been like, no way, you know? But he's like, why
Yeah.
don't you? And so I book a plane ticket for just a few weeks later. I leave Cody with my parents. So he's with his in-laws and my 1-year-old for, like, it wasn't too long. It was like 4 or 5 days. And I go over to Italy and I piece together the perfect trip. I sell it out. Took me like a week or 2, maybe 3. I sell out this trip. And then, of course, COVID happens. And I was devastated. I prolong the trip. Then I just cancel it. The beauty of COVID, though, and I don't know if you've heard this in any of your other interviews or even with your own business if you experienced this, but the beauty of COVID is that because we had to cancel the trip, because we had to refund all these guests, they wanted to come even more. People,
Mm-hmm.
and I think we all can relate to, no matter where we lived or how stuck at home we truly were based on like the state or country we were in. I think everyone after COVID was just itching to get out. And so what happened is I took my family back. I now had 2 kids. I took my 2 sons. We went to Rome for a month in October of 2021. Because I thought, there's a little element of Italy that feels like time travel. Like you kind of never know
Mm-hmm.
quite how things are going over there. Like the internet coverage isn't the same. Like it's charming, but it has this like outdated touch to it. I never quite know what's going on over there till I go over there. So I thought
Yeah.
we have to go. We have to go in the flesh and make sure like is masking and vaccination cards and stuff, does it just ruin it or is it possible? Because they're highly strict over there. We go over there and I'm like, yep, this is happening. And so we cover for a month, like what we're going to be doing on the tour and what the things we're going to be seeing and doing, the places we're going to be eating. And while we are over there, we sell tickets to this tour. We give first dibs to all our previous customers that hadn't had the chance to go on the trip yet. And we immediately, in seconds, sell out 2 tours. And I'm like,
Wow.
so humbled. I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, hey, this better be the best trip ever. You know, I'm feeling the pressure because we sell out one tour and then we just go back the next day and sell out another one. And fast forward, I mean, it's now 2025. This year we are hosting 8 tours. They have all been completely sold out since the day they went on sale, which was last year. And I have a team. I've got an incredible assistant helping me lead the tours. I now have a co-host. So she's hosting half the tours. I'm hosting half them because I do have a growing family. You know, I have 3 little
Yeah.
kids and I love what I do, but I can't be in Italy all the time. So lots of talking, but that's the crazy story of how I began taking women on tours. And not just one more thing to add, Kirsten, is, you know, they're not just food tours where we just go see the essentials and eat at good restaurants, because
Mm-hmm.
certainly we do that. But like I think what I'm most proud of with these tours that I didn't anticipate when I was creating them is that these are tours that actually change women's lives and make them feel like their cup is full and they're rejuvenated and they have a moment to connect to either themselves or the girlfriend they came with or a piece of art that they found super moving or like a bowl of pasta that just like warmed them from the inside out. And it's a huge, you know, and as I've progressed in my motherhood, because my kids are now, I feel like a new mom still, but my kids are 6'4" and 1.5. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
learning the more and more I do this, like that women need connection and women need to feel just rested and fulfilled and like their cup is full. And so that's truly like the great privilege of what I do is, you know, we're in the business of food tours, but we're really in the business of like making women feel connected and fulfilled.
I love that. And isn't it funny? Because if you had seen that and understood that from the beginning, you probably wouldn't have even hesitated to put together a food tour. It was just kind of needing to put one foot in front of the other. And I think sometimes people do have that vision right out the get-go. Like they're very aware of this is going to fulfill a bigger need than just a travel experience. And then other times you figure that out as you go along because you just have to meet the demand, right? Like now that you see that, you're probably understanding it in such a bigger way, like you said. And it's so much more essential than just a fun little getaway or a trip where you can eat yourself sick in Italy, which that's a fun perk too, right?
Right.
I love that. That's so cool. And I have friends that I've told this before too. And I think there can be a lot of imposter syndrome. And you consider yourself, I'm not really an expert. Like I'm a tourist and I've just come here. I have a friend in particular. I'll have to send her this episode. I've told her for a long time. You have traveled so many places. Put together a tour for single women who don't feel comfortable traveling alone and host that. And she's like, I've been there several times, but I'm not a pro. I'm like, they've never gone. You only need to be like 2 steps ahead or 1 step ahead of people to be able to provide a service and value to them that they're going to have the most wonderful experience and you're going to be doing something that you love. So is it kind of now amazing and such a dream that you get paid and actually make money to go to your favorite place and have fun and meet people? Is it just so wild?
It is so wild. And I mean, don't get me wrong, you know, I'm pouring my heart into it, but I love it. Like there's
Mhm.
different things, you know, there's certain, as we've talked about, there's little pockets of my business. And now it's kind of mostly 2 things. It's either content or the tours. But
Mhm.
I love working on it. Like I've had, you know, a couple of meetings this week and we're brainstorming like, how do we make the tipping system more efficient? Or we've got the Jubilee this year in Italy. Like, how can we make this
Mm.
streamlined, you know, so it's like, doesn't feel chaotic to the guests. And like, I love that. I even love that. But to your point, like, I mean, I've just been like looking at my flights coming up on my Delta app, and I'm like, I am so excited. Like, I cannot believe I get to go back over there. And there's parts, that are tiring and hard, right? Like, it's, for example, like being on can get tiring. So there's things I have to parameters I have to put in place. Like, I know I can't stay up till midnight or 1 every night talking to guests because I feel depleted and I won't be a good host the next day. Or I know I have to get like my daily walk or exercise in. Or I know, there's certain things that I know, like, okay, this is going to help me be a good host. But like, really, the more I do it, the more I love it. The closer I get to all the locals that I work with, the restaurant owners, the tour guides, even like the bus drivers, like I have this affinity for them and I feel like they kind of love me back too. And the food, I mean, I'm excited more for there's not one bite, not one restaurant that I'm like, ugh, because I pick the menu. I can pick literally
Yeah.
everything we eat. And another cool thing too that I anticipate is, just to be totally honest, like I'm an extrovert at heart, but as I've gotten older, I've become more introverted. I think that comes with kids and just feeling depleted.
Energy preservation.
Yes. And so I in the beginning I was a little intimidated by, will I have the energy to like be the life of the party, and because I do think as a leader, if you're having fun, everyone else is having fun, and I pride myself in that. And I've been worried too about personalities, like, will I like these women and will they like me and will we all get along? And what I have learned is that at the end of every trip, like I feel so connected and close to these women, and I'm so sad to say goodbye every time. And so, not to like take that in a somber direction, but like going into it, I see names on a list and I'm like, I'm going to love every single person on that list. And appreciate something about them, and usually I learn something from most of them as well,
Yeah.
which is like just so cool. Like, when else do you get to do that, especially like as moms? Like, when else do you get to like sit down and really get to know women and get to know like their struggles and their triumphs and like what in their life has like made the difference? So
Amazing. So this has obviously been an evolution, starting with the blog. We're doing this now, and you mentioned you have 2 major income streams, and that's with content and then the trips. So how do you kind of treat the business? Is it more like a part-time thing? Is this fully supporting your family? Where are you at with that? And like, what's your big picture vision now that you have these 3 young kids and maybe even more family coming down the line? What do you see? How do you see like what you've done? Because I don't know about you, but I grew up where, yes, there were a lot of entrepreneurs around, but I feel like it's more accessible now, and it's such a different way that we can approach being moms and having businesses. So are you kind of in the sweet spot now, or do you see yourself wanting even a little bit more? And where does it fit into the whole family dynamic?
well, I'll just be straight with you. I mean, like I said, I love work, and I definitely am like, oh, like it's going to be so nice when my kids are all in school one day. And then all the seasoned moms will be like, don't wish it away. Enjoy these young years. They get harder. And I'm like, oh. But I do feel it, it's hard because day to day, I'm like, my life is chaotic. My house is a mess. I mean, if you could see behind my screen right now, it's absolutely, I would be embarrassed, right, to show you. But I do feel like it's the good life in many ways. And I think, too, you have to do what's right for you. And again, I know I'm talking a lot about motherhood, and I assume you have a lot of female listeners. But, for me, I feel really comfortable with my work schedule, which is I'm with my kids till usually 1 in the afternoon. And then in 1 in the afternoon, that's when my son goes to preschool, my daughter naps. And from 1 until 5, which is when I start making dinner, that's my time to work. And my husband, I tag team this. He actually left his job 3 years ago to work on Female Foodie with me. So it's like
Amazing.
It is amazing. It's also like so not what I grew up with. I mean, my family was very traditional, and I had an incredible upbringing. My dad worked his butt off as a lawyer, an IP lawyer, literally for years and years and years. I mean, just worked and worked and worked, and showed up for the family too, right? So just gave his heart, gave it all. And my mom was like the ultimate homemaker, like gave that her all, like showed up in every way possible for us. So now that I'm in this, like, I'm working with my husband and I'm like parenting kids with him, sometimes it's uncomfortable, I'll be honest. Like sometimes having parameters is actually nice. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we have to just, it's a lot of hard conversations. It's a lot of like kind of recalibrating and figuring out what works for us. And we do not do it perfectly. So I don't want to like give off the illusion that like working with your spouse is like all that in a bag of chips. Cause like it's hard. It's hard for both of us in different
Mm-hmm.
ways. But we are full time. We also have 2 full-time employees. Um, we have a chief of staff that she's from Utah as well. Her name's Colette, and she's incredible. And then we have I have an assistant, Julie. She is overseas. She's from the Philippines, and she is literally the glue and does so much for me. Um, and then we have multiple contract employees that do things for us,
Mm-hmm.
like design work or help with social media, or even I mentioned, having a co-host, Michelle, who I adore, is going to be helping host these trips with me. And so I feel like for right now in my season of life, I wouldn't have it any other way. This is exactly how I want it. I am grateful for the time that I get with my kids, and I'm super grateful
Mm-hmm.
for the time that I get to work. But I think down the road, I guess I just want more of both. Like I want to be able to work more, and I want to be able to like do more with my kids as they get bigger.
Yeah.
Um I want to, I don't work full time as I called out. We have 2 full-time employees. So Cody and I technically are like more part-time employees, and I'm super grateful for that. Like that's how I want it to be right now. But I'd love to
Mm-hmm.
be working, all day while my kids are at school eventually. I'd love to bring more people onto our team. I've found a lot of joy in like hiring people that are way better and way more equipped to do things that like I'm just not very good at. So I think just the dream in, I don't know, 5 to 10 years would be to not only have more team members like on the back end, but like really expand our tour business, especially, and have like more
Mm-hmm.
hosts, um, more tours running so that we can help more people feel connected, and have the chance to go on these
Yeah.
trips that thankfully and incredibly sell out immediately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's so cool. I love it. And I think it's so powerful to live in a time where you can say this is literally our company. This isn't just like a blog. And how cool. You probably did not plan that as a kid thinking I'm going to totally run a company with my husband and it's going to be based on food that I ate and then I'm going to create tours. Like it's such a unique world that we live in where that can become your reality. And it probably feels like a dream life that you've been able to do. Lots of work, lots of intention goes into that. But I love that we do live in a time, you and Corinne both, like you've built these entire companies off of your passion and things that you're super interested in, very strategically leveraging SEO, building something powerful, and you're willing to make the pivots and you're continuing to explore different avenues, but not to the extent where you're going to like overkill and completely derail the whole personal life too. So I think it's the marker of true success when you can find the balance between those things that a lot of people feel like is not possible. So good job. You're
Thanks,
doing amazing
Kirsten.
things.
Thanks.
Yeah. So, can you talk to me about Substack a little bit? And just hearing you say that, I wasn't intending to talk about this, but I do feel like I'm glad you mentioned AI and things have just shifted with even SEO. We're seeing some legacy posts of yours that are not performing as well. And I think it's just there's a massive amount of quantity of content and different sites and stuff that exists now. So, tell me a little bit, maybe even for our listeners, a strategic approach to I'm familiar a little bit with Substack, but where is the advantage? Because I've seen Corinne, a lot of people shifting over there. So talk through kind of the strategy there and what the advantage is.
So I'll start with the advantage. The advantage is you get to write about whatever you want, whenever you want, and it's not in general. I say in general because there is like the notes portion on Substack, which kind of acts like social media, which is where people will go and
Mm-hmm.
like share a thought or promote a post. But in general, the advantage is it is like totally anti all these things we've been investing in for years. When I talk about SEO, like let me give you an example. So I developed a recipe for focaccia pizza that I published earlier this week. And I wanted to publish it before Valentine's Day because I thought, well, if people want a Valentine's Day recipe, this could work great. It's like pizza. That's like fun for families or even couples. But then if people don't need a Valentine's Day recipe, right? Like who doesn't like focaccia
Mm-hmm.
pizza? And so I have spent months on this recipe. I finally nail it. Like I finally get it to where I want. Like the dough is exactly bubbly the way I want. The toppings are holding up. It tastes amazing. And I didn't do an ounce of keyword research for this. It was pure passion. It was pure like, this sounds amazing. I know my readers will love it and I want to develop this recipe. In the past, what I would have done is I would have gotten onto SEMrush or SEMrush, however you want to call it, which is like this really cool tool. It helps you understand what people are searching in, like, so for example, it could tell you how many people each month are searching focaccia pizza. Like I could pull it up right now, but you know, if you get on there and I'll just do a little quick search, because I don't want to even make up numbers. So 6.6 thousand people each month on Google are searching focaccia pizza. And then if you actually go, so that's actually not a terribly competitive word. Now, if you search something like banana bread, chocolate chip cookies, some of these more broad recipes, like you do not stand a chance to rank for those key phrases. And if you don't rank, you don't make money. And if you don't make money, well, it's kind of like hard to, I think,
justify doing it at all.
Yeah. And I think if you're starting, you should plan on working for free for a few years. I mean, I'm not saying that like, oh, you got to earn it and you can't just don't take a paycheck. I think you can be creative from the very beginning. But like when it comes to content creation, you really do have to be willing to just like put your head down and plow forward. But, you know, if you've been doing this, I mean, I've been doing recipe development for 5 years now and honestly did not see a lot of success with my key phrases specifically in relation to recipes. And so, you know, even looking at this focaccia pizza, it's like, well, like, you know, if you search that online, we've got all these incredible, super robust content creators that have already published a recipe. Joy the Baker, The Kitchen, you know, some of these I haven't heard of before. Bon Appetit, right? It's really hard to compete. The beauty, though, of doing it on my own, whether it's like something really specific, like maybe I wanted to do like carbonara focaccia pizza, right? Maybe I wanted to like get even further, or something super broad. It does not matter. It doesn't matter because this is not an SEO play. It's a play of showing up for my audience. So that's the advantage. That's my really long-winded way of saying it's just such a breath of fresh air to write about only what I want and exactly what I want. I can develop recipes that literally just sound good to me. And there's no, I mean, of course, I'm thinking about the reader. I'm trying to anticipate their needs and what might sound good to them. But like, I'm testing dumpling soup today because that sounded good. It's a cold, snowy day and I'm prepping for a recipe on Monday and I'm like, they're getting dumpling soup. And even on, you know, Female Foodie Friday, that's not really like an SEO optimized thing, right? And I honestly don't even share it. Like I'll share an affiliate link here or there. It's really just to connect myself with readers and to make it feel like they know me and they like have a voice. You know, I love the functionality of comments and liking. And I love too that Substack goes either straight to your inbox. It depends on kind of like how you set it up. But like, let's say you get on Substack and you subscribe to like 10 different newsletters. Some of them might be free. Some of them might be paid. Those newsletters will go straight to your inbox. So it's like I never get on Pinterest anymore. I have no idea what's going on on Pinterest. Well, if you never get on the Substack app, which isn't my favorite to be honest, or even on your web browser, like those newsletters will literally go right to your inbox. So that answered the question of like why I like it. And the other question was like, what's the plan? Like how am I planning to scale it?
Yeah, because I know for so long that was what we wanted was the SEO. And because that's kind of tanking and I'm seeing the appeal, I think it's kind of like when you're in a product development world, there's advantages to being on somewhere like Etsy and Amazon because you just are in the marketplace where people are there. Right. And I see Substack, and maybe I feel like I'm right in assuming you're kind of taking advantage to the fact that there's a community and readers, consumers are enjoying platforms like that. You have people, I don't want to mention any brands, but there's some people I follow who are exclusively on Substack. And because I'm on there, I'm now getting recommended other people who are in my same interest. And so is that kind of like the biggest advantage, even though you're losing the edge of SEO? Is it kind of like, well, we're all going to lose the edge of SEO anyway, and so let's just create for the sake of enjoying it and host a community and get paid, it's kind of like putting the power back in the hands of the creator a little bit, where you're still splitting a little bit of that with Substack, but you're garnering a much more engaged, interest-based community that's more personal brand and not just like SEO-driven content where you're locked into the same thing for the rest of your life.
No, that's exactly the play. And just, yeah, it's a long game. It's not like a
Mm-hmm.
viral overnight. I mean, there's certainly best practices. I've delved into, I've taken like courses. I love becoming a student of something that I don't know anything about.
Mm-hmm.
So I've enjoyed like learning best practices, which is posting consistently on a specific day. And, to be honest, I'm not perfect at it, but I have showed up every week. Sometimes my posts won't go live, though. Like what I'm actually trying to do now is have at the same hour on the same day, have that content go live, because I think the habit of that
Mm-hmm.
is so powerful. And that's just, newsletter best practices, right? It doesn't matter if you're on Substack or not. It's great to have like a consistent day and time so people
Yeah.
kind of go, oh, like Kirsten just sent out her newsletter. Like I get this every Wednesday at 10 and it's so nice. Like it makes my day and it kind of boosts me a little bit. But really, really good writing. It is definitely a writing medium. You can make it a medium for something else. I think it's Elizabeth Gilbert who wrote Eat, Pray, Love and multiple other books. I believe her Substack is just like a video Substack. So like there's different mediums you can work with, but in general, it's a great place for people that really want to write and are committed to just the long game. And so I think, yeah, for me, that like just going back to strategy, I just think like it's if you build it, they will come strategy. Like I don't have
Mm-hmm.
any more tools than just if I make really great recipes and I do my best to promote them and I help people realize that like instead of buying, I don't know, like a bag of chips, I'm trying to think like what's $5, that it'd be worth like giving something up for like $5 a month to get like my very, very, very best recipes. And not just my
Mm-hmm.
very best recipes, but like recipes from someone they trust and feel connection with. That's my hope, is to like, because I think we all have content creators that we love that we're like, I don't care how much it costs. Like if like,
Mm-hmm.
whatever they're giving you is incredible. And that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, I love that. So as you're building that up, that long game strategy, and I love that you're being vulnerable and so transparent with like the blog numbers have changed. Are you still able to monetize, and will you keep the blog itself going too? Or is it kind of like this slow transition over to Substack because now you'll just have a subscriber base? And then maybe I'm thinking too big, but like what comes after? Because now you're beholden to the platform for the membership. Is it kind of just like a jumping off point? And what's the long-term strategy, or do you not really know because we have no idea what the future holds with technology?
Well, just to answer that off the bat, so the cool thing about Substack is you always own the emails no matter what. So
Mm,
like if I want to like do a cookbook one day and like promote that, like I would always have those emails. I started in October and I want to say I have like 6,000 total subscribers. That's a combination of paid and unpaid. And so, you know, no, that's like, I mean, when years ago I went to dinner with Pat Flynn and he was like, I was like, "Okay, Pat, like, if you could go back, like, what would you redo?" And one of the things he told me was like emails, emails, emails. I mean, anyone that studies business knows that like
mm-hmm.
email list, like we literally just saw TikTok dissolve for a day and then came back the next day. But like, you do not own anything. So I think that's the exit strategy, no matter what, for me, is that I will own all of those emails. I will have
Mm-hmm.
intimacy with the audience. And I may, I don't know. I may want to pivot to another platform. I may want to stay there. I just had my website redesigned like 2 years ago and I love it. And I love the team that I worked with and they did an amazing job. But to answer your question of like, what will happen to that? I don't know. I think right now I just find it to be a good place to host all the
Mm,
previous content I've done. And
yeah.
there may be a time where like I want to put more energy into posting there. But what I keep telling my readers is like my latest and greatest is all going into the Substack. So people can keep accessing this stuff on the website. I, of course, and then on my end, I'll continue to monetize somewhat, for sure. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I don't want to act like my ad revenue is completely gone away. I'm still getting a great chunk of change, but it's trending down, and I'm choosing to embrace that instead of like panicking and throwing
Yeah.
my hands up in
Yeah.
the air. So it's really, this move is really about diversifying. And
Mm-hmm.
I kind of have both. And, you know, just to take it a step further, like it's a little hard sometimes when I'm on Instagram. I'm like, what do I promote? Well, of course, I'm promoting everything I'm putting on Substack because, like I said, that's like my baby right now. But
Yeah, it's your home
yeah, it's
base.
my home base. But like I have so much content. And I also, you know, when you're a recipe developer, like if I perfect something, I'm usually kind of sick of it by the time I perfect it. So I have a ton of fun going back and going, oh, like I really loved that cornbread recipe, but like I was so sick of it. I'm going to make it again and just film it. So I do a lot of repurposing for social. And I feel
Mm.
like doing probably the majority of that or a little more than half of repurposing, but then promoting the Substack, it keeps people happy. They don't feel like, well, gosh, I can only be a part of her community if I pay for her Substack,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'm giving them like, hey, like here's some of the greatest hits. Here's some of the free stuff. And oh, by the way, here's this like brand new, very exciting thing. If you want to be a part of it, great. If not, here's hundreds of other recipes on the website.
Yeah. Yeah. So would you recommend somebody listening, because I know that some people say like blogging is dead, whatever. Would you recommend this being something a beginner does? Like, would you still say, yeah, go start a blog, invest time into the SEO, or would you honestly, truly, where you're sitting right now, say, focus more on a platform like Substack? I know that's like putting you on the spot.
No, I love talking about this stuff. I mean, that's such a tough question. Okay, I think it would depend on your niche. Like if I don't have a
Mm-hmm.
little sister, but let's say I had a little sister who was like, I want to do a blog about like DIY. Do I do
Mm-hmm.
like a Substack or a blog? I mean, I would say like dig into what's going on the internet right now. For in the recipe scene, it is very obvious that like, and you know, the recipes have been dominated by a lot, you know, if I'm trying to think of like there's certain names that kind of dominate and have dominated for years, like Taste of Home and Bon Appetit, right? There's always going to be those big brands, but it's just so hard to rank it. I may even recommend like reaching out to an SEO expert. Like, how's
Mm-hmm.
this niche doing? But I'd probably dig into your niche first, and I would just ask around. I would ask around, you
Mm-hmm.
know, as a person that's done this for a long time, if I had someone that came to me and asked this question just like we're discussing, I would have no problem sharing my candid thoughts because I've invested so much that I want to alleviate people of the pain.
Mm-hmm.
If my like imaginary little sister was a
Mm-hmm.
recipe developer, I probably would not tell her to do a website.
Mm-hmm.
Gosh, it feels so sacrilege to say that out loud, but I would maybe encourage her to like maybe focus on a Substack. Maybe, I mean, it's tough. There's so many advantages to all the little things, you know. It is so nice to people will Google your name, and
Mm-hmm.
it's nice to have that website there. It's nice to have the reviews on there. But I guess it
It
just
probably
depends on
just
your goal.
depends on where you're going.
Yep.
Yeah. We just said the same
Yeah.
thing in different words, right?
Yeah.
Like, what do you want? And we had a conversation today with the Millionaire University team, and like, that's so crucial. If we don't know where we're going, we're all going to have these competing agendas, and we have to come back to that focus of like, we have this thing that works. We can dig so much deeper in what's working. And yes, we have a few things. Even for us right now, social media has kind of been like, we want people to know we're actually really here and we're real people and that we're posting regularly, but we're not putting a ton of energy into growing the socials because we're putting so much energy into growing the podcast. And that's our goal, that's our vision. And somebody else might have a totally different agenda where it's like, well, the podcast is just one component, but I really want a big, huge personal brand. So I think that's a great answer. And it is quite nuanced depending on what you're doing, the niche you're in, all those different things. And I think it's good though, just to be upfront and say, like, it's not the same as it was. If you're going to go try and recreate what you did, which has been over the last like 15 years, right? That's probably not going to happen in the same way. You can't
Right.
replicate the success identically, but it's possible to take the principles of content creation and just find what's currently working. And then I love that you recommended too. The lifeblood of anything is having that email list, being able to take what you have and move anywhere because things will change so rapidly that you have to be able to pivot with it. So, all great advice.
Thank you. And I would add one more thing too, that I think you have to trust your gut and your gut feeling. Like I just, you know, to be totally honest, the Substack was a gut feeling. I mean, I'm a very spiritual person. I pray a lot. I'm, you know, studying scriptures a lot. Like that's, you know, a big part of my life. And I really did feel like drawn and like kind of guided to starting a Substack. I had, multiple kind of at once, like people telling me and recommending that like I should look into it. And so I think too, like sometimes in business and in content creation, there's just things that like we know deep down, like we get that feeling of like, ugh, does it like make you feel sick, or does it kind of give you butterflies and you want to go for it?
Mm-hmm.
And I know that
Mm-hmm.
might not be like the most sound business advice, but really I do think that like sometimes just as the person doing it ourselves, like we know ourselves more than we think, and we know our abilities deep down. And so I just think trusting your intuition is huge.
Yeah. Amen. I second that all the way. I think that's so important. And we can give all the advice. And there's, like we said, there's so many different variables and details that should go into a decision like that, or just what to do. I think it's just nice to know that content creation, if that's something that you love, whether it's writing, filming, like whatever it may be, photography, there's still always going to be a place to use the gift and use the talent and the interest. And the platform might change and the strategy might change, but it's never too late to step into the scene and become a new creator. It's never too late to share your perspective with the world. If that's food that you love, anything like that, trips that you love going on, I think it's just nice to continue to iterate that you're never too late to the game. If anything, you're exactly right on time, because there's so many advantages now to starting. There's always going to be like barrier of entries that open and close, right? It was harder to do back then, but now it's a little harder to do for different reasons. So yeah, I appreciate that, Brooke. You are brilliant. It's been so cool to see the evolution of what you've done, starting with something that you love and turning this into a full-blown company that supports your family. It's so exciting. And I hope everybody listening sees the potential, that there's no limitation beyond your imagination. That was
Thank you, Kirsten. That was beautiful. That was
quite a
poetry.
soundbite,
Yeah.
right?
That was
Probably
great.
heard it somewhere. That was a Wonka level.
No, that was you. That was original.
Oh my gosh. Okay, anything else to add, or where can we find your blog, your Substack? We'll link to everything in the show notes, but just where's the best place to connect with you in real time and get your best stuff? I know it's probably obvious based on our conversation,
No,
but
let's send it home. I would love to connect with anyone listening on Instagram. It's Female Foodie. That's where I hang out the most. And of course, come join me on Substack. Even if you don't want to pay for a subscription, I do a free newsletter every Friday. I share one of my 4 recipes every month is free. So I've tried to find lots of ways for people to be a part of the community, no matter what. And I would just drop a comment, especially if you're coming from the podcast. I'd love to hear from you. And thank you.
Amazing.
Thank you, Kirsten, for having me on the show. It was an honor. And this last hour just flew by. You are such a great host. And it was fun to chat about these things.
It was fun. I appreciate everything that you've shared. And yeah, we'll redirect everybody to all the things. I know we're probably building up some appetites, even though we didn't talk specifically, but I'm hearing dumpling soup and focaccia, and I'm ready to go eat dinner. So
let's go.
With that being said, let's go eat. Thanks again, Brooke.
Thank you so much.